Hi guys. So today we're going to read some of our workbook called Stop the Chaos: How to Get Control of Your Life by Beating Alcohol and Drugs. Okay. The 12 steps are: we admitted we're powerless over our addiction, that our lives have become unmanageable. We come to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We admitted to God, to ourselves, to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. We were entirely ready for God to remove all of these defects of character. We humbly asked Him to remove all of our shortcomings. We made a list of persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. We made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. We continue to take personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admitted it. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for the knowledge of His will and the power to carry it out. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. We're on chapter 6. Of our book. Identifying high-risk situations. Relapse to chemical use is especially common in early recovery. We lack a lifestyle that supports abstinence. We have had little experience at remaining sober. We haven't developed activities or coping skills to help us through situations that could threaten our sobriety. High-risk situations can be described as any person, place, or situation connected with using drugs or alcohol. Anytime we're around alcohol or drugs, any place or situation that is associated with high stress. As recovering people, we're faced with deciding how to avoid high-risk situations on a daily basis. Some of these will be easy decisions. We'll probably choose not to attend the let's get acquainted all-you-can-drink or use $5 block party, being sponsored by the local liquor distributor and the friendly representatives of the Colombian drug cartel. But what about situations involving family, friends, or job responsibilities? Is there danger in these seemingly safe situations? Many people return to chemical use in a situation where they believe they are safe. We try to be attentive to high-risk circumstances. It's unlikely that we would knowingly put ourselves in a position that would lead us back to chemical use. The problem is that we're usually not aware of what actually makes up a high-risk situation. The lack of awareness can be dangerous. 3 simple searching criteria can guide us in recognizing threats to our sobriety. Any person, place, or situation connected with using drugs or alcohol. For some of us, this includes just about everywhere. Yeah, we know using friends or using situations can bring on urges, some of which can be severe. The phenomenon is unpredictable. If we're in a place where we've used before, we can never be sure that we won't be overwhelmed with sudden urges. Old thoughts and emotions can come back in a moment. Our brains have many automatic, unhealthy responses just waiting to be triggered. John had finished an outpatient substance abuse program. In the past, he spent his leisure time at the local sports bar with his friends. He understood that this could be a problem, but thought that he was strong enough to handle it. Besides, his friends knew that he'd quit drinking and drugging. It felt very comfortable to him to return to his old hangout. The smell, the noise, the people, the atmosphere were all the same. He found that the only thing missing was a drink. One of his friends offered to buy him a beer, saying, "Just have one, man. You're not an alcoholic. You just did too many drugs." The next morning, John called in sick to work. He still had some drugs left from the night before, and he was planning another trip to the liquor store. He was immediately back into his addiction. Any person, place, or situation connected with using drugs or alcohol. And John thought he would be able to handle using urges. He knew he was dependent on drugs and alcohol, but he believed he would be strong enough to handle it. He assumed his friends would support his recovery. When we rely on logic and willpower to handle our chemical use, we dismiss the power and unpredictability of our addiction. We can't depend on non-recovering people to understand what we need. They have experienced addiction. They haven't experienced it. They most likely don't understand addiction or the lengths that we need to go to remain sober. And anytime we're around alcohol or drugs, be cautious. If drugs and alcohol are around, there are always a chance that we could use them, even if we firmly believe we won't. We can't predict how we'll react in the presence of chemicals. Our ability to resist drugs and alcohol is unpredictable. The belief that I don't feel like using, so I'm okay, is just not valid. We can't judge our commitment to sobriety based on what we're thinking or feeling at any given moment. Dana's experience shows that past triggers can change our thinking in seconds. When we encounter situations where chemicals are present, we must exercise caution. Any place or situation that is associated with high stress, some of us forget that stress builds up. Rather than being triggered by a single catastrophic event, stress may result from a number of different areas in our lives. Poor financial conditions, relationships, and work situations can build collectively to create overwhelming level of stress. So Dana had 6 months of abstinence from drugs. His company was having a holiday party. He felt obligated to go. He knew that there would be alcohol in the restaurant, but Dana reasoned he was a heroin addict and seldom had any desire for alcohol. He felt safe in his decision to attend the function. For the first 2 hours, Dana had a wonderful time with no using urges. Then Dana's ex-wife came in with another man. Within seconds, the old resentments and anger were back, and all he could think about was having a drink. He left immediately, but was baffled by the idea that when his old emotions were triggered, he sought help from whatever chemical was around, not just his chemical of choice. He was amazed at how fast his thinking changed. It had taken only a few seconds. Stress plays an important role in our ability to handle high-risk situations. When overly stressed, we tend to make irrational decisions. We want to relieve the stress as quickly as possible. If the stress becomes too intense, we may choose to use chemicals to cope with the discomfort. Carolyn went to her physician for the results of her biopsy, and she sat in the waiting room. Her fear was mounting. She had never experienced this type of anxiety without reducing it with chemicals. She thought that if the results showed cancer, she deserved a drink, and if she didn't have cancer, it seemed right to celebrate. Carolyn had placed herself in an extremely stressful situation without having thought about the possible consequences. Any place that has the potential for bad news, such as a doctor appointment, a court proceeding, or a meeting with someone who has pushed our buttons in the past, can be a problem. We do not yet have the skills to handle high-stress situations safely. Avoiding people or places that have caused or could cause emotional trauma is also important. Attending a funeral, visiting a cemetery, interacting with former lovers, and confronting past failures all have the ability to trigger traumatic memories. These emotions can create using urges to suppress the resulting emotional hurt. We revert back to old thinking and behaviors to deal with the pain. Looking for solutions. In each of the previous examples, people put themselves in high-risk situations without realizing or preparing for it. Some of us may think we can't go anywhere without risking our sobriety. Remember that we're focusing on identification. If recovering alcoholics and addicts frequently relapse in situations where they are unaware and unprepared, then it is important for us to be able to identify dangerous situations. This gives us choices. One choice we always have is to not put ourselves in a high-risk situation. If we're undecided, we can turn to others in recovery for guidance. We may not see potentially dangerous situations ourselves. If we determine that we cannot avoid high-risk situations, we can take the following steps. We can take someone with us who is in recovery or who understands addiction. We need support in a high-risk situation. Many people are not knowledgeable about addiction. We may hear them say, I know you went to treatment. Here, have a beer. Don't get drunk. Many times people who know about our dependency will choose not to intervene, even if they see us using, for fear of saying or doing the wrong thing. Having someone who understands us and our fears and urges is important. It keeps us accountable. We can give ourselves permission to leave an uncomfortable situation. We don't need to test ourselves in the presence of drugs or alcohol. We've taken that test before and failed. Sometimes an event that we believe will be relatively safe can turn on us. This is the unpredictable part of our addiction. We can give ourselves permission to leave before we attend an event. Jean and Bill attended a social function for Bill's company. Jean told Bill before the event that she had concerns about how she might react to liquor that was sure to be there. And they discussed this and decided that they would drive separately so Jean could leave if she needed to. Letting others know ahead of time that we may choose to leave makes it easier for us to make the decision later. We won't feel as though we're letting others down. Remember that our recovery comes first. It's far more important than any approval we may get by staying in a dangerous situation. We can have a reliable way to leave should we choose to do so. When we give ourselves permission to leave an uncomfortable situation, we need a reliable way to leave. Some of us may not have driving privileges as a consequence of our chemical use, but we can avoid being trapped at an event with no way to leave. We can plan beforehand to have a sponsor or friend pick us up. How would you have handled the situation of John, Dana, and Carolyn? What would you have done in their positions to protect yourself? What are some of the high-risk situations you know that you will encounter? How will you manage these situations? Where can you go for help identifying and preparing for high-risk situations? Remember, in early recovery, we're more susceptible to return to chemical use than we may think. To protect ourselves, we need to constantly monitor ourselves. What we seek is awareness. If we're aware of risky situations, we can act to keep safe. We need to be cautious around drugs and alcohol. We can't assume that knowing we're addicted will keep us sober. We can't judge how well we're doing by whether we're having using urges. We can give ourselves permission to leave uncomfortable situations. Phrases such as, I think I'm strong enough to handle that situation, or I'll be okay, I know I can't drink, are red flags that our thinking is off track. We're in trouble when we think we've got this recovery thing under control. In time, preventative thinking becomes automatic. We're going to take a break.